Four giant multi-hulls left Doha in Qatar on February the 5th on a 23,000-mile non-stop round-the-world race. The Oryx quest is a race of firsts, which began with the fleet sailing out of the Arabian Gulf and into the Arabian Sea, south into the Indian Ocean, en route to the notorious Southern Ocean. As the Oryx quest fleet began a second week at sea, the Indian Ocean was serving up new experiences. 7 days dominated by light and shifty winds, blistering heat and debris. Cars, houses, logs and trees left in the wake of the tsunami. But the contest has been compelling. Up front, the French trimaran Geronimo had been racing south in sight of the Qatari boat Doha 2006, skippered by Briton Brian Thompson. Further back, the round-the-world record holder Cheyenne from America was battling the oldest and smallest boat in the fleet, Daedalus, skippered by the indomitable Tony Bullimore. The Indian Ocean is different from the North Atlantic. It has 2 doldrum belts, one north of the equator, the other south. In the first week, the fleet sailed steadily through the northern doldrum area. By week 2, they are back in similar doldrum conditions. Hot, moist, electrically charged air. And after more than 3,000 miles of racing, Doha 2006 and Geronimo were still in sight of one another.
We left the second set of doldrums at about 10 degrees south, and we had to get to 30 degrees south to reach the high pressure, the little gateway to the Southern Ocean. We have to go around that, like a big roundabout, and leave that on the left-hand side.
Doha seemed to have a very aggressive policy for getting south as quickly as possible, and this was seen as the gate in the weather materialised, and Doha were going straight south for it. Geronimo, probably because she's a trimaran, had a little bit better pointing angle, and she's skirting the high but a lot closer to the high. So on the distance to go, Geronimo took the lead and was doing really nicely and getting closer to having less miles to go, but Doha was getting closer to the Southern Ocean.
300 miles to the north, there was an unlikely but equally fierce battle taking place. Daedalus was toe-to-toe with Cheyenne.
It's been hard work to keep with her, but it's really been skillful because Nick Leggett, the navigator, along with Lee Bruce, our shore-based weather router, have worked very hard and have guided us across the equator, through the doldrums down to where we are now.
Aboard Cheyenne, Dave Scully had a different perspective.
The only battle going on here is really between us and our boat. Keeping that going. Daedalus did make some good time. They did an excellent job of transiting the trades and getting into the westerlies. But yeah, I really haven't been paying too much attention to Daedalus.
Whilst Daedalus and Cheyenne battled it out, Doha 2006 and Geronimo were skirting the high-pressure system, which they needed to round to get to the strong winds of the south.
As the boats moved into the South Indian Ocean, they had to contend with the South Indian Ocean High, which is an area of high pressure that meanders between Western Australia and South Africa. Now, getting through this high is the trickiest part of the Indian Ocean leg. If you go too close to the high, you run out of wind. So the technique was skirt the high, but don't get too close to the middle. It was a question of balancing speed, not getting too close to the high pressure, keeping the boat all in one piece, and also getting south as quickly as possible.
Skirting the high-pressure system in an effort to get south brought the fleet some difficult upwind sailing. Uncomfortable for the crews, but also tough on the boats as they bucked over the tops of waves and slammed into the troughs ahead.
The sea is quite rough and the wind is on the north, and we're pitching, like hell all the time on the sea, and we're wet on deck, and inside the boat is like a shaker. You can't do anything without being tied to somewhere. So it's not an easy life, it's quite unpleasant.
It's also a question of balancing speed with safety and not blowing the boat apart. Doha 2006 regained the lead and stretched it to 100 miles ahead of Geronimo further east. De Kersesson was looking to try and sail a shorter route. Thompson heading more directly south to try and get to the Southern Ocean first. It was not the pleasant sailing of a few days before.
30, 40 knots upwind at times, free reef and storm jib for a lot of it. It was very bumpy and both of us were pushing hard to get to that high pressure as quickly as possible and get into the strong following winds in the Southern Ocean. So I think we were both trying to outdo each other.
Geronimo and Doha were very close in terms of miles to go, but they got two different techniques for getting round the high. Whereas Geronimo was going in towards the high a little bit on a hotter angle, Doha was heading south. So it was a balance all the time between speed along the actual course and getting to where they wanted to go to pick up the winds later.
Doha was taking the westerly option, driving straight for the strong westerly winds of the south, whilst Geronimo took the easterly route to try and cut the corner. It was Doha who surfaced first. By the end of day 11, Doha had hooked into new breeze and was powering south with boat speeds in the high 20s. Travelling the greater distance had paid off as Thompson and his team sailed around Geronimo and into the lead. Behind, Daedalus continued a defiant British charge, cutting the distance between themselves and Cheyenne to just 7 miles. No one could believe that Daedalus had been able to hang on to the world record holder, least of all Mark Featherston, who contacted race control to complain at Cheyenne being represented by a green boat on the race website. Green is bad luck for sailors, and he was having none of it.
Yeah, when we first started getting the information through on the official website, I was very dismayed to see that we were portrayed as a green boat, which is not the case, of course. And I really felt that as we got off to such a bad start, there was only one reason that could be, and that was we were a green boat.
And how do you feel now that we're a purple boat?
Well, I don't have to say anything. I think the facts speak for themselves. Since we've changed to purple, our fortunes have changed.
Sailors are traditionally a superstitious bunch. An irrational fear of anything green, website boats included, is not uncommon. Green bits of rope have allegedly been banned before the start of a race. Then there are name changes, which are said to be very bad news, which is rather unfortunate for the third name change, Doha 2006.
Oh, I'm not very superstitious. I think you make your own luck. We've got 13 on this boat. Well, some would call it 12 plus 1. We might even have some bananas at the start, and that's supposed to be bad luck.
Somebody told me once that bananas are bad luck on a boat.
For me personally, I'm not superstitious at all. I probably wouldn't like the idea of having bananas or something on board.
We might draw the line at rabbits, because that has been known to be very bad luck, especially amongst French sailors.
To be superstitious is bring you a trouble. Don't think about your trouble and everything's happened well.
But there is one superstitious ritual that's never forgotten.
The crossing of the line ceremony is really more for the crew morale than for really assuaging Neptune.
That is something you have to do because otherwise you can have incredible bad luck.
Anyone who hasn't sailed across the equator would get a sort of a very nasty ceremony of getting covered in gunk and flogged by the rest of the crew.
That normally means lashing them to the trampoline and baptising them with various odds and ends that have been swirling around the bilges for the last couple of weeks. But that's not a superstition, that's actually quite important.
The upwind slog had claimed its victims. Daedalus was the first to report injury and damage.
James Dunning had a very, very slight sprain on a wrist. He twisted it, but I had a look at it, and it's better now. We've got no problem with the crew, but we have had one or two problems with the boat. We've got two main water makers, which makes our fresh water from seawater and one of them has decided to pack up. But apart from that, the rest of the boat is in super condition. We're going very fast, and we don't feel that we're going to have any big problems with the boat.
I think a couple of the guys have felt queasy, but I was pretty laid out for 48 hours, and that was a bit disappointing because I felt that I probably let them down, but they all seem to be very understanding.
Yeah, well, our comms went out because they got flooded really by the constant water. It was incredibly rough on deck. You know, the helmsman had to wear the crash helmet just to see forward because the spray was just flying constantly, and that spray must have the waves must have just filled up the SATCOM dome and put it out of action. So that's a real shame.
With the Southern Ocean approaching, the end of the second week at sea was the last chance for the crews to make sure they were ready for a pasting. Checking up the mast, tuning the rigging, releading chafe lines. In just a few days, shorts and t-shirts will be replaced by heavy wet weather gear. On the morning of February the 18th, Doha 2006, leader of the Oryx quest, hooked into the northern edge of the first Southern Ocean high-wind, low-pressure system. The fast track east across the bottom of the world had begun. This is what sailors had really signed up for. High-octane sailing downwind towards Cape Horn. 98 miles behind Doha, and Geronimo was still struggling in lighter winds. They'd sailed closer to the centre of the deadly high pressure, and were watching as Cheyenne began to close the gap, now clear of Daedalus and steaming up at 30 knots.
Okay, we're doing approximately 30 knots, and we've just changed from the slow length to the stay sail, and we've still got pretty big breeze. As you can see, the Traveller's right now, and Hervé is just trying to take up the slack in the cockpit.
Cheyenne had been proven to be perfect in the south, with oversized bows to keep the boat from tripping over. For Olivier de Courtisson, the chance was close for him to prove the validity of the trimaran concept. An epic battle was shaping up, with the Southern Ocean sitting in judgment.
It's actually probably the worst place in the world, but there's just something about it.
You are sometimes at the very limit of the capacity. And it's one of the last great untouched wildernesses on this planet.
My real reason for wanting to go around the world is the Southern Ocean. I think that's the draw card that everyone has to want to be involved in one of these events.
It's a fascinating place, you know. You are in true wilderness. It is like it has been for centuries, well, thousands of centuries.
It's a part of the world which is very different of all the other parts about the weather condition, the color of the sea, the temperature too. I mean, it's wild.
It's different. It's, you know, it can be really good, really exciting, and it can be damn scary. So, you know, all in all, it's not a place you rush back to.
Well, the Southern Ocean is a really remarkable ocean, you know, different from every other ocean in the world by the fact that there are no land barriers around its entire path. And what that means is the wind is able to drive the entire body of ocean from the surface to 5 kilometres deep. The average wave height typically would be 3.5 to 4.5 metres, and so every few hours you'd expect a wave of maybe 8 to 10 metres, and we measured waves of over 100 feet high, and so that would be at least as tall as the masts of some of these yachts.
The Southern Ocean will be a very different experience for each of the 4 boats. Cheyenne, with huge bows, is built for heavy weather.
So the bows have advantages and disadvantages, but on a dark night in the Southern Ocean, when you're crashing down the faces of 40-foot waves, well, that's when the bows make you sleep at night.
Not such an easy ride for the crew of Daedalus. The smallest boat in the fleet does not have much comfort or protection of size. The crew will be totally exposed to the elements.
On this boat, the Southern Ocean is going to be very cold and wet. We're the only catamaran in this race that has the cockpit between the two hulls. And just on the delivery down from Bristol, we found we get a lot of waves coming over there. So the Southern Ocean, day and night, is going to be cold and wet.
Well, at this time of the year, you can get ice. You can get ice any time of the year, but it's more so towards the summer. That's when it breaks off, you know, the icebergs, and you get growlers and everything else.
I've been through a lot of ice, and it's, you know, it's pretty much Russian roulette. We were just riffing along, and one morning, and just looked down in the quarter wave, which is the wave that comes off the side of the boat, and there was an iceberg as big as a mini under the water, and we hadn't seen it, and we were going 20 knots plus, and we would have definitely sunk if we had hit it. So yeah, it's not, it's a lot, it's luck.
Ice is usually often found at the main front, so that's the fronts where the cold and the warm water meet. It tends to congregate things. It's an effect we call convergence in oceanography. So they might well be concentrated in the places that the yachts are trying to pick up the fastest current, so a problem for them to balance advantage with current speeds and hazard of icebergs.
I think sailing in the tropics and the trade winds is quite fun and quite pleasant, but it's kind of anybody can do it. The Southern Ocean is what you really remember. It's what it's all about.
Before they could even taste the thrill of the South for real, disaster for the crew of Geronimo at dawn on day 14. While sailing south at speed, they discovered a split in the forward beam. It was structural and massive. And if it led to a complete structural failure, the consequences could be fatal. The news was sobering over on Doha 2006.
I guess, you know, Geronimo just went out a little bit too far, and we hope that we haven't caused any damage on that leg, but it was really, really quite brutal on the boat. 3 days hard slogging upwind, and I know it's a shame that something went wrong with them, and it was good that they had that high pressure there, a little bit of light air for 1 day, just so they could check over the boat, find the problem.
While Thompson and his crew blasted away, de Kersisson took the decision to divert to Australia for repairs. As Geronimo headed east, a dark cloud on the western horizon signified the approach of a stormy front. The first Southern Ocean storm was coming, and the Oryx Quest sailors were heading to a place where legends are born. On November the 10th, 2000, a Frenchman called Yves Parlier set out on his third Vendée Globe solo round-the-world race attempt. But it was not to be third time lucky. In the depths of the Southern Ocean, his 100-foot carbon fibre mast came crashing down. After constructing a jury rig at sea, he reached Stewart Island off New Zealand some 3 weeks later. The rules of the Vendée prohibit competitors from receiving outside help, so Parlier spent 10 days drawing on all his strength and ingenuity to repair his damaged mast. He even had to look to the sea for his food, eating seaweed when his own supplies ran low. After 127 days at sea, he returned to a hero's welcome. With Geronimo heading for a pit stop in Western Australia, life at the front was a lonely affair. Doha 2006 had opened out a lead of 700 miles.
It's cold and wet, windy, and very dark at the moment, but everyone's enjoying the sailing. And, you know, obviously enjoying being in the lead here and enjoying sailing on this boat, which is a really fantastic boat to sail, especially downwind. Once we got that upwind over, it's all been looking up just by the weather.
Behind, Cheyenne had picked up speed, and life on board had changed as they set off in pursuit of the leaders.
It's a lot colder, and we have some albatrosses coming through. Winds are between 25 to 30 knots, and they're expected to ease a little bit, but certainly it's a spectacular beginning of the Southern Ocean.
Further north, the crew of Daedalus was still enjoying dramatic sunsets as Tony Bullymore headed to a place where he was rescued by the Australian Navy.
We're probably about 1,500 miles from, you know, where I had my big adventure, you know, when my keel snapped off when I was doing the Vendée Globe in '97. And it's something I don't think I'll ever forget. You know, as I always say, if it wasn't for the good old Australians, I would have never made it. I would have, you know, I would have been a goner. They come and saved my life, and there's no doubt about that. And so I always say cheers for Australia, and every time I pass it, I always salute them and say thanks mates, and you know, hope I never have to call on you again.
Geronimo had sailed themselves to safety, and at 4 a.m. local time on day 18, the French boat took a tow into Fremantle as skipper Olivier de Kersesson explained what had happened a few days earlier.
We have been very fast in tough sea, and I think that something like some floating object has been hurting this part of the boat, because it looks like an impact, like a floating piece of wood in a wave, you know, and the boat comes to the wave and takes a piece of wood. That's what happened, in my opinion.
The crew were tired and dejected, but relieved to have escaped a potentially life-threatening situation.
You can afford to stay at sea with that problem on a boat like that. Too dangerous.
Do you think if you get back into the race, you have a chance of catching the others if they have damage?
I don't know. I mean, I am a sailor. I am not, you know, Mr. Irma. You know, I'm not reading the cloud. You know. Be serious with your question, please.
At daylight, the bright sunshine of Western Australia was a stark contrast to the place that Geronimo should have been sailing. The boat lay idle as the technical team made their assessment.
It's a bit bigger than we first thought, as the inside skin is actually broken, so it's probably going to take a bit longer to repair. So we tried to remove the damage area, the first crack, and remove the delaminated carbon. Since the inner skin has been damaged and broken, it will just work its way bigger and bigger for sure.
A decision on Geronimo's future was several hours away. Meanwhile, the rest of the fleet was jetting east. Will Doha run away to Cape Horn? Can the giant Cheyenne make up the miles now the fleet is down south? And can Olivier de Kersesson rejoin and still stand a chance of winning $1 million? Join us next week to find out.